welcome everybody to another episode of Journeys to Inspire, Pathways to Leadership. My name's Lee Thomas. I'm the Regional Director for South Africa, but the founder of the Alliances and the founder of all these wild, fun channels where we're collecting authentic stories and journeys of community members that are part of the Alliances. The purpose of JTI, Pathways to Leadership, for those that are not aware up until this point, is that we are just capturing how people are getting to this leadership mantle in the wild world of corporate, and just their versions of how they've actually got there for the next generation to find affinity to it or not, in some cases. I'm joined today by Tamlynn, who's part of our UK alliances, the CISO alliances predominantly, which is headed up by James Smith, the regional director there. Tamlynn, please introduce yourself for those that are not aware.
Thanks, Lee. Hi, everyone. As Lee mentioned, I'm Tamlynn Deacon. I work at a company called HBK at the moment. Been there for about 2.5 years, but quite a varied journey to get there, as we will dig into in a bit.
In short, if you can, how have you got to this point? I know you've had an interesting journey to get to the role that you're in now and the country that you're in now, right?
Yeah, multiple countries, in fact. It's difficult to keep this short. I actually had a talk on this last week and realized that I overran by about 20 minutes. I'll try to abbreviate it a bit more. So who I am from that perspective and how I've got here is I'm very focused on people. I feel that people are the most important asset to our companies, and their own journeys are super important. The reason that this has become a fact in my life is I had a pretty rocky start growing up in South Africa. When I was 7 years old, my dad left us, and we ended up not actually having a home to live in. So my mom had to have 3 jobs just to get us by. We lived in a bit of a dodgy neighborhood for a while, and I ended up finding the church to get into a position of some sort of stability to understand where it is that I wanted to go in life, or just to not go down the wrong style. And this was a decision I made when I was 11 years old. So it wasn't something that had been born out of me making a lot of mistakes already. I was a child myself. And what I found at the church was being able to have a community of people who really cared about others. And I'm not talking about the religious aspect. It's specifically how you want to help other people become or see or do or have something better, and just to help out of the kindness of your heart. So when I was 13 years old, I was leading younger kids in township situations where they had seen horrific things in life. And it really started affecting me from that position of, wow, how privileged I am to be where I am, and to learn that lesson at such a young age has really helped drive me to become who I am today, and to want to follow that path of becoming a leader, and not necessarily knowing that that's what leadership was. So it kind of all kicked off from there. I eventually started studying theology with the church because they offered to pay for it, and I had absolutely no money myself. And on my second year of studying it, my sister had moved to England, and she just said, just come here for 3 months, just 3 months. This was back in 2004, just to see what the rest of the world is like. And I mean, it's 20 years later almost, and I'm still here. It really was quite a stark contrast for me to see how growing up in a super stressful environment, having all of these negative emotions around you, having to deal with all people's pain and suffering and very intense traumatic events that people have gone through, and I myself went through, to a country where it's safe. And I know that there's things that we think, oh my word, the knife crime and those things are increasing, but in comparison, it's like a breath of fresh air being somewhere like England. And that really gave me this good boost of thinking, right, if I could have learned all of these things when I was super young, that has molded me to become somebody who's compassionate and passionate about people, then what can I do to help others who haven't necessarily had that life experience to understand, firstly, how lucky they are, but also how they can make the best of the opportunities that are presented to them. So that's kind of where it got to, into the point of my actual career and how I got to where I am. So as I say, was theology, moved to England, worked in a restaurant for 5 years, which was basically when I finally got to be a child in my 20s, because I was an adult from the age of 7, really. And that was really good fun. But then I got a bit frustrated working the really, really long hours and trying to study microbiology, which was then my choice. CSI was big on the TV at that time, and I really loved it. So I thought forensic science, that's going to be me. And decided to go for a nice, easy 9-to-5 job. Little did I know that using your brain from 9 to 5 is actually quite taxing. And that was as an administrator of at a pensions company. Quickly worked my way up through that because I like people, as I say, and I got bored quickly. So had 3 promotions within that company that I was in. And the final one was into IT risk, which was my first moment of, okay, what is this world? I know nothing about IT. I didn't know how to use a spreadsheet. It was very amusing. I remember actually I had a post on Facebook that pops up every year reminding me that I was like, hey guys, I'm working in IT. And all of my friends from when I was a teenager just put like ha-ha-ha's. Like, no, you're not. This must be a joke. I'm like, no, really. So yeah, that was the first step. Then did a few certifications, and as everybody who knows is in the industry, once you start getting certifications, LinkedIn things start popping up and people grab you. KPMG said, come work for us for a while. So I did my stint at the Big Four. Wasn't for me because, again, people need to be the focus, and I felt while working as a consultant that numbers were the focus, and that wasn't my path. And it's great for some people, but it's not mine. So moved back into industry, and then worked at another couple of companies, heading up the security department and doing compliance side of things from that perspective. But eventually, I just got completely fed up and decided to start my own company so that I could specifically focus on people, because I didn't quite get how this couldn't work in business. If you put people first, surely the business will be successful. And I just got fed up with trying and decided to do it myself, which is when I started my own company. COVID hit, had a baby, and it was really, really difficult to keep that going, and heartbreaking from the people perspective that I had employed. And so I decided to make the move back into industry, and here I am.
You're a success story, but when it comes to managing expectations of others, right, this industry is a tough one. Information security, cybersecurity is a real tough gig for most feel that in the industry themselves. If there's others on a similar path to you or looking to adopt the same pathway that you've taken, how would you manage their expectations on potential barriers and hurdles and challenges?
Okay, so it is quite obvious. I'm wearing pink. I'm a woman, and it is an interesting question. If I'm speaking to people in general, my answers would be generic about how you look at them. If I'm speaking to women specifically, it's a very different story, right? We've got a lot of challenges that are a bit different, and while we think that things have shifted, they have shifted, but they haven't shifted enough, and the legacy is still there. So for the CISOs, technical debt is a big problem in our industry. Culture debt is a big problem for women in our industry specifically, because we still aren't up there in the high percentages. And diversity in general, this is the case, to be quite honest with you. But there are certain things that I've learned along the way that I would like to pass on to anybody who would like to hear it or wouldn't like to hear it, because that's one of the big things, is only take advice that you want to take advice. Listen to it, let it go in, take it or leave it. It's very important that you don't feel like you have to do something that everybody is actually doing. So that's my first point, is everyone's path is different. One of the big things I've learned is not to be judgmental of other people's decisions and not to let their judgment completely affect you. So it's important that you can do that, and you take that advice on in a certain way that is either, hey, I actually really agree with this and I'm going to do something about it, or I really disagree with it and I'm going to do something about that too. So to keep that in mind. So the second point is, learn who you don't want to be as well as who you do want to be. and to take in from mentors. And mentors can be anyone, right? They don't have to be somebody that you specifically chosen and had a conversation with. Would you like to be my mentor, please? I think you're amazing, which is great in certain instances. And I definitely have had a couple of those in my life. But anyone can be your mentor. My first mentor was my dad. And even though he left when I was 7, I learned that it doesn't matter how dirty I get as long as I'm having fun, right? Like I can climb trees and make mistakes and scuff my knee just because I'm a girl. That's not a bad thing. You know, who cares if my dress is ripped? You know, I had a good time doing it. So you can learn things from people throughout your life and take those moments from your mentors and understand that even the most experienced and wonderful people who have absolutely skyrocketed in their careers can make mistakes. They're still people, and don't bring that down and think that all of the lessons that you've learned because all of a sudden a value that they have is different to yours means that they're not good. You've got so much that you've learned from them, and to keep taking it from that. One of the big things that I would say for my next point is that you should always lead because you care about people, not because you want the title. If you're jumping into that job title, you're like, oh my gosh, I want to be a CISO and this is going to be amazing and this is my career path and that's where I want to be and yay, I'm now successful. You're missing the point because this is an industry that is still relatively new and it's growing and it's misunderstood by the majority of the company that you're working with. So you need to be able to lead people for the sake of leading them. And that doesn't mean you have a title. The title usually follows, to be honest with you, because if you're pulling people on a journey with you and you're making difference and you're becoming an enabler to the business rather than a detractor and putting up blockers and saying you can't do this because my policy said X, Y, Z, you're not really leading. And if you can't lead, you're not going to get to that point. And it's not just your subordinates or your colleagues that you need to take on that journey. It's your peers in other areas. It's your boss. It's your boss's boss. There's so many people that you can actually still take on that leadership journey with you without having the title. And that was quite a difficult lesson for me to learn when I did learn it, but it definitely helped me to move that forward, to move my career forward and to try and get to that point of actually understanding why am I really doing this? What is the real basis for me doing what I'm doing right now? And you are going to make mistakes. Like I said, with your mentors are going to make mistakes. You definitely are going to make mistakes and people are going to call you out on that and they're going to make you feel terrible. And sometimes you're not going to make mistakes and sometimes you're going to make the best decision possible and people are going to call you out on it and they're going to make you feel terrible. Take it on board. Feel your feelings, get those emotions under control eventually because mental health is so important. Figure out what it is you need to do to take that next step and then let it go because you can't hold on to those things forever. You can learn from them or you can choose to not learn from them, to one of my earlier points. So just figure out what your best next step is there and do that. I think another good one is kindness. So this is for me, and everyone's different, but because of how I've grown up, and understanding people, who they are and what they can be. Being kind because you don't know someone's story is super important. Being able to understand that you don't understand what's going on in their lives and just be there for them. It's often frowned upon in the corporate world because everyone's like, hey, this is politics. We've got to do these jobs. And you look weak, especially as a woman. You look super weak if you aren't being a hard ass all the time. Excuse me. But it's one of those things where even though it's not looked on in a great way, be kind anyway, because there's no point in being somebody who you don't want to be. And to circle back on an earlier point, be diverse in the lessons that you learn from people, not just up. Look down to, look next to you. Remember that your team is a team. It's not you being somebody who is telling people what to do and how to do it. It's you being collaborative with who it is that you're working with. And I think finally, the last point I would say is there are haters, as we've mentioned before. There are people who are not going to like you. Take the energy from them because they can give you so much grief and so much hate, but that's energy that they are giving you. Take that energy, flip it over and use it for something positive. It's however you perceive what is being given to you is the truth for you. So make sure that you find a way to perceive things in a way that's to your benefit, that gives you the positive energy, and just let them be, because you can't change who they are. You can change where you're going. So yeah, I guess that's it really. I think with that naysayers one, that's pretty much what gave me that final drive to start my own business, because I just got so fed up with it. So fed up with people telling me I couldn't do it, sometimes even because I was a woman. And to have that kind of a mode of you can't be a leader, you're not in the right place, you don't wear the right clothes. And I'm like, what on earth does that have to do with it? Until I realized, oh, they mean because I wear a dress to work as opposed to a suit and trousers. That's great. It's you've got to take that energy and flip it. So yeah, to me, it's a really important one, not to let them get you down.
You touched on a few things there about changes that you made along the way. If you can sort of consolidate them in terms of advice to your younger self at possibly key points throughout your development personally and professionally, is there anything in particular that you would have changed? Not regrets, but changes that you would have made, right?
So I think if I could look back at my younger self and actually say, right, yeah, be me for myself with age and context, there are a few things that I would shift, and those lessons that I've mentioned are the result of those things that I would shift. So having that introspection whenever somebody didn't like me or didn't like something that I had decided to do or questioned my ability, being able to flip that moment to be quicker, to be able to flip that moment quicker in my mind. I mean, I would spend weeks and months thinking about something that someone said, and to them was probably just a flippant remark, but to me it was like, oh my word, this is my boss or his boss or whatever the situation is, and I would be like, what does this mean? What have I done? And then I questioned myself, and that was something that I would definitely go back to my younger self within my career and just be like, just stop it. Take what they've said. If it makes sense, apply it. But they don't know the journey that not just me as a person where I've gone to, but where we are in this company. They've hired me for a reason. I've told them the facts. I've given them a path through this particular situation, and they're telling me I'm wrong. That's okay. This is their company. That's what they can do. That no longer sits on my shoulders. And to be able to be like, okay, that's fine, and move forward is really important. And the other point, which I mentioned quite earlier, is from a mental perspective, is to learn from people that you admire, but to also learn who you don't want to be from them. That one was really, really tough for me. I tried to change who I was because I had a female mentor once who just told me, but this is just what it is. You have to be hard. You have to be stronger. You have to have no emotions. This is how you have to go. And I tried so hard to do that, and it ended up putting me into such a mental health spiral that I was like, but this isn't who I am. I can't be this. Like, maybe this career isn't for me. And I took what she had told me so close to heart and tried so hard to apply it that I ended up doubting myself again and regretting who I was turning into. And it was when that penny dropped, when I was like, oh, actually, I want to do the exact opposite of that, and let's see how that works. And that's when things started flipping. It was like the bottom of a loop, and then the catalyst just kicked me off, and I was like, actually, I'm going to fully embrace who I am, fully believe and go for my personality and be, sounds cliche, the best me I can be, and see what happens. Because the alternative is trying to be somebody else and failing. And I know it's old school, but until it makes sense to you, it doesn't make much sense until it really does settle with you. So those were definitely things I would do. Another thing is Risk Pro. I don't want to use the word failing, but the company that I had started, which was fully about bringing people onto the journey, helping people get a foot into security, who had no experience in it before, but also making it super simple for other companies. That was like the premise of the company that I was building. So it was definitely people-centric first. You don't need to have super skills to get into cyber. You don't need to have super skills to have a safe environment. When, as I said earlier, I was 6 months pregnant when COVID hit, and I was the sole income into the company. So I was self-funded. I was contracting myself out to pay everybody else's salaries. And it was this moment of, oh my word, what am I going to do? I've got my employees. I've got a baby on the way. Now COVID's hit. Who knows how long this is going to last? What am I going to do? And this moment of my company is going to fail. I'm a failure. And that was myself then doubting who I was, obviously being very pregnant and emotional, as we all know we go through. For anybody who's known anybody who's pregnant, it's really, really tough. And making that decision at the end to not reopen Rispro was also heartbreaking, because I really thought, well, I can't do it. And in that moment of, surely there's a way to make this world a better place by putting people first, I was like, maybe there isn't, like I can't do it. If I can't do it, who's one of the most compassionate people I've ever known? I know that sounds weird, but it's kind of true. Who can do it? Like there can't be a way. And I had to, again, start slowly but surely building my confidence up over walking out of it and be like, actually, look what I did achieve. And there are now 5 more people that have got different career paths because of what I did. And I've got not just different career paths, I got them out of very service-based industries through COVID, where they would have had next to nothing, into very lucrative careers, and they're enjoying it and they're thriving in it. And I've learned so much about myself, about taking risks, and the joys that you can do from doing that. It's the positives that came out of not failing, but the positives that came out of having a company that didn't succeed outweigh the other possible positives that it could have had it succeeded. And being able to look back to my younger self and just be, my younger self is only 3-4 years ago, and just be like, you know what, it's okay. You are going to feel better about this in the future, and it's okay to feel how you're feeling, because this is your passion project. But it's okay, because good stuff will still come.
Where and when have you felt comfortable in uncomfortable environments? You've touched on a few already, but how have you used them?
Yeah.
Possibly as a good question.
Yeah, as I've kind of touched on here, having Rispro is 100% that. I have never been more excited and more nervous and more worried, but more keen and eager to do something that I had no business doing. I had no actual running a business experience, no any idea of how it worked out. I didn't understand anything about how the government worked, the taxation, which we mentioned before in other conversations. All of these types of things. I was like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? This is absolutely crazy. But I've also never been more sure of starting something in my life. It was an idea that had struck me about 10 years before. So it was just after I'd actually started in the industry. I had an idea and I was like, why has nobody done this yet? And it just kept going. And eventually, over a decade into it, I was like, I'm just going to do it. So it was absolutely the scariest thing to do. But to your point of felt comfortable feeling uncomfortable, it was 100% the right thing to do. It's believing that there's got to be a better way, right? It's understanding that you're not just doing something for the sake of doing it. Everybody has imposter syndrome, or whatever you want to call it. Every single person has it. So understanding and feeling those feelings is okay. Look around you. I promise you the person next to you is either going through it then, has, or will do tomorrow. It's just the way it is. And the joy of it is the confidence that it builds off the back of that, because once you can take a risk that puts everything on the line, and it fails or it succeeds, either way, your lessons that you're learning off the back of that gives you a level of confidence that is, you can't pay for that. I can speak to CEOs and CFOs, and I don't get nervous about it anymore, no matter how much money they earn. I'm just like, you're just a person, and I know how you feel, because I had to do this once upon a time, and yeah, clearly yours worked, but it doesn't make you any better than me. We're all people, and we're all on this big crazy world spinning around together, and let's just make the most of it. So yeah, I would definitely put it down to starting my own business. It happens still. I do still have it. It hasn't gone away. Imposter syndrome is a thing that hits every now and then. Even coming to speak on podcasts, I think, oh my gosh, you see that recording button flash and you're like, oh, that just makes me feel nervous, but like, whatever, let's just go for it. What's the worst that can happen? So,
Yeah, exactly. I'm with you. I'm a podcast host, right? I'm no host, but apparently it says I am. So yeah, we just take it on board and go and run with it, right? Obviously, Journeys to Inspire is aimed at inspiring, and Pathways to Leadership is talking to the next generations of whatever industry we're focusing on, right? Specifically with yourself and where you are at the moment as information security, cyber security, that you're impacting as an industry, if you like, at the moment. In terms of the next gen, how do you pay it forward? What do you do to help the
yeah.
next gen?
Okay. So as I've mentioned in our conversations, I'm definitely a people person. I always put that first in everything that I do. So I don't actually think of it as paying it forward, though naturally it does become that. But because I'm always putting people first, their careers, I'm trying to push them into uncomfortable but stretch situations.
Mm-hmm.
For example, I've got a young guy on our team that I send to different events, even though he's like, oh my word, I'm the youngest person there with the least amount of experience, but I'm sitting there with CISOs and CIOs, but he's pulling it off and he's doing it, and he's moving in that direction. But each of my team, I have a different relationship with each of them and try and push them where they need to go. As I've mentioned before with RiskPro, definitely bringing in people out of the industry into the industry that don't have those 6 years experience and all the certifications, because they show a passion for it. So if you're putting people first and helping them realize their own goals and own dreams, you can help direct them. And sometimes that's not even in security. It sometimes completely veers off and they end up being marketing person or whatever that situation is. So it's really inspiring for me. This is why I don't feel like it's paying it forward. I feel like it's paying it to myself to watch people develop with help or guidance that I've perhaps given them. So I try to share my story whenever I can. I try to be authentic with the people that I speak to. And especially when it comes to women in cyber or diversity and inclusion situations, I try to make sure that people understand that it's not just about the traditional pathway. There are so many different routes that you can go in to move forward in your career. So I think that's basically it.
Yeah, no, it all helps. I think another area as well, and I felt this conversing with a few as we've developed this concept here, is that does my opinion matter? Is it important enough anyway? Who cares about my journey, right? But I think it does, especially in this industry. To get from the professional development standpoint, right? I think it's really important to showcase how people are actually getting there and the reality behind it. It isn't this, you're on a graduate program to become a CISO. It doesn't work like that, and it hasn't worked
Exactly.
like that for years. So the management that you would be reporting into these business divisions are
They're
not.
not going to be there.
There's change management galore going on, right? In terms of understanding what this industry is about, it's really different. But also the other side of it is the human element, right? And the most important side of it is that the impact as a human being on a role is really important, holistically, because you can develop people's strengths and resilience through allowing people to find affinity with other challenges that people come through, right? Not everyone's got a
Definitely.
sob story or nothing like that, right? It's just strength and resilience and showing that this too shall pass, and you can get over most,
Exactly that.
with the right support network, right? Right, onto those that have helped you. I'm sure there's so many. You mentioned
Yeah.
on mentors typically get categorized as those helping you professionally, right? But it might not be the case. So, are there any platforms or individuals that you'd like to thank for
Yeah.
helping you get to where you are?
Yes, definitely. So as I mentioned, I had to grow up very early. So my mom and my sister have been there throughout that time, and we have learned so much from each other through that process. My mom has definitely taught me resilience, and my sister has taught me how to have fun. And it's a really, really good place for me, and I couldn't be where I am without them. Keeping it on a personal note, my partner is freaking fantastic. He basically supported me throughout RiskPro, and having that basis of it doesn't matter if it fails, because it's just money that you've invested, and knowing that it's okay being in really bad monetary situations before, and I got out of it. So having that kind of support at home was super good. And then on a more professional note, there are a lot of women in my past that have helped me get to where I am, either by teaching me what I want to learn and what I don't want to learn. But most recently, I would say Annalisa Miller, who's the CIO at Spectris. I was contracting to Spectris in that very last job that I had when COVID hit. So I worked very briefly with Annalisa there. And when I raised the question about 10 months after my little one was born, saying, I'm not sure I want to reopen my company. Do you know of any companies that actually appreciate women and diversity and don't judge you on being a woman, but on what your skill set are? It wasn't a we don't know, maybe I'll think about this. She was there and available, and to this day I speak to her professionally when I need advice or assistance, but also personally I can be so real and honest with her. So I definitely want to give her a shout out for being absolutely fantastic and a great mentor and friend.
Amazing. I'm sure she'll appreciate that. There's so many awards and things like that are out there, right? But the personal thank you is something that we want to make sure that this platform gives the opportunity for, right? Because you never know really the conversations that you have with people and how much that'll help them. Yeah, I think it's really important. Tamlynn, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your honesty and authenticity throughout this conversation, and all the narratives that's going to be cut out of this that nobody else will see. But no, amazing. Really appreciate it. Great to get to know you, and also thank you so much for what you do for the alliances in the UK. Right?
Thank you for creating it.
It doesn't go unnoticed.
It's refreshing as I keep going.
It's all good. Thank you very much.